Hey there, everybody. Craig Cottle, Director of Nature Blind School, and we are going to cover. I didn't necessarily call these a part one and part two, but they sort of are. Part one is how to read people navigating the human terrain, and then this one is how to read places. And you can listen or watch both of them separately, and they don't necessarily need to be watched together, but you would probably get more out of the two of them if you listen and or watch how to read people first. That'll be helpful in this particular webinar that we're doing here. So let me go ahead and share my screen again. So how to read places. And so this is an interesting topic, navigating the physical terrain. So basically what we're going to do is take what we learned in how to read people, and then we talked about it briefly in how to read people in proxemics, how people interact with one another, and how they, adoration and mimicry and stuff that we discussed, and how to read people. This goes a little bit further in how people interact with their geographical environment, literally the terrain in which they live. It doesn't matter if it's a cityscape. Matter of fact, you can see a lot of this easier in a cityscape than you can in a rural or wilderness area. So that's what we're going to cover today. So I love this topic because I usually try to set aside some interesting and important concepts about how the human eye works when we're discussing either how to read people or how to read places. And so I've set it aside for this particular topic here. One of the first things we need to know is rods and cones are inside the eye, and understanding how they work is going to be critical to understanding some of the stuff that we're going to discuss. So rods help us see black and white, help us see in low light, and help us with our peripheral vision. That's for sure. Cones are the things that help see color, but require a lot of light to do that. So one of the things I do with like some adults and even youth programs is I'll have construction paper and show them the construction paper in the dark and then shine a light on it so they can see. It's a real interesting thing for you to do. This is important for, you think about it, from a lot of this study has been done in the military for being able to build camouflage that works well at night. So it's an interesting topic that goes really deep. Central vision. So central vision is the spot that is directly in front of your eye, and in that spot things are the clearest. You actually slightly off to the left on your left eye and slightly off to the right on your right eye have a small blind spot there. And that the reason I like to bring this up is that if we're observing something, let's say that I'm just observing a phone, I want to put it directly in front of my eyes, and that's going to be the optimal place for me to see. If I want to look at something and take in details about it, then I want to turn my head and look that direction so that when I turn that direction, that the thing that I'm looking at, I can get that information and being able to get those details, and it'll help me considerably. So each blind spot that we have is important. And basically what's happening in that blind spot is the brain is filling in the gaps. It knows what's on one side of it, what's on the other side of it, and the brain fills in the gaps. So with that said, the items that you're seeing there in that blind spot, you're not actually seeing. Your brain is filling that in. And this is a concept that really needs to be understood too. The eyes are part of the brain. You'll hear some people say that. Had some really solid medical people say the same thing. A neurologist that used to study with us said, it's basically an extension of the brain because they're directly connected to the brain. So that is an important thing to understand, that the brain and the eye are just working together constantly. Very important to understand. So one of the things that's important for us is that we understand that our eyes are biased towards motion. So if we're trying to hide, for example, if we're trying to hide from somebody, the last thing we want to do is move. We want to hold still. So in a rural environment, think from a hunting perspective. You're hunting, or let's say somebody's aggressing you or chasing you, then the last thing you want to do is, if they're searching for you, is to just run through the woods, because then they can see you and they can set up a plan of action. So if you can hide or remove yourself put yourself behind a wall in a cityscape, put yourself behind a hill in a rural scape when you have to move, because it makes it harder for anybody, makes it nearly impossible for anybody to see you, possibly hear you. But if they see you in an environment moving, because our eye is biased towards that, it's going to be easier to pick up. Dark adaptation. Sorry about that. This is another interesting topic. So when we go from an environment where we're in our homes, we're in our work, we're anywhere where it has light, or we're in the daytime, and then we go into an area where it's dark, it's going to take a full 30 minutes for our eyes to adjust. So think about it. Let's say that you want to go jogging at night. Okay. You leave the house, everything's bright, you go outside. It's going to take about 30 minutes for your eyes to get adjusted to be able to see things clearly that are around you. I like to share that little tidbit when I'm teaching self-defense, because, take that 30 minutes to get your eyes adjusted, stretch, get your body ready for the run, anything that you want to that's outside, so that your eyes can get adjusted to the dark before you take off. For the first 10 minutes, it's going to be the cone cells basically maintaining control of what's going on. And so you got to give it that time for your eyes to be able to adjust appropriately. Color vision changes as the light changes. So the more you, for example, one of the colors is orange. You can't see orange after dark, in the dark. If you have an orange piece of construction paper in front of you in the dark, it's going to look brown. And again, this is a fun thing to do with kids, so they can see eye adaptation as well as color vision and things that go along with it. But this is because the rods and cones are basically going back and forth. So the thing that comes out of that is twilight vision. Twilight vision is the most difficult time for your eyes to be able to see anything, because there's a little bit of light and a little bit of dark in your eyes. The rods and cones are just going back and forth trying to control what's being utilized inside the eye, which is transferring information to the brain. Think about that from the perspective of a runner too. So let's say that and I like to use this example because there's been recent events where somebody, it was a national event where somebody was grabbed while they were out running. And if you're running and you're going from dark to light, dark to light, dark to light, then your eyes cannot adjust quickly enough for you to get full vision of what's going on around you. It doesn't mean you can't see. You're not blinded, but you're not getting very many details. You're not going to be able to see that biased emotion even as easier as you can if your eyes adjusted either rods or cones. So very important to understand. So look at these two photos. So this is just a demonstration with the use of a camera, right? But if we come out and on the picture on the right, we're getting ready to go running, we're getting ready to go on a walk, we're walking the dog, we have to go through an area for whatever reason, our eyes are going to see things about what we see on the right. But if we give it that 30 minutes, we'll start to see what we're seeing on the left in this photo. Totally different, two totally different situations where you get to see a lot more detail. Dynamic decision making. So this is where we, as a species of animal, if you will, have to make decisions on the fly and under stress, trying to get to the point of where things are just automatic. We want to get things to where it's automatic and we can make decisions quickly that are good decisions and not make our situation worse, whatever that might be. So some of the things that we can do to help that is to give things our attention. Some of these things are a little bit obvious, but I'll throw some details at you that I think you're going to find interesting. The more your attention is divided, no matter how good you think you are at managing multiple tasks at one time, when your attention is divided, you cannot give your brain and eye enough time to catch up with what you're seeing. You just can't if you've got multiple things going on in your brain. So there are times when you have to have selective attention and focus. So I do some room clearing drills with some of the best instructors literally in the world that have ever gone into rooms in battle and law enforcement and stuff of that nature. And this is one of the things that comes up a lot is know your task when you're going into a room. When you're on the stack and you go in the room, you got a task. That way you can have your selected attention where it needs to be. Same thing is true if you've got kids. I mean, it's the same exact thing. You might want to play on your phone. You might want to have the TV running in the background. But even if you have the TV running in the background, you've got children, then your attention is divided among different sources of information that are coming in, either through your eyes or your ears. And so when it's time to give something your important, focused attention, give it. And there's nothing wrong with that. You don't have to, it's not, in the modern world where there's so many data points coming into us at any given time, it seems like a lot of people take pride in the fact that they can multitask. And I'm not saying there's anything totally wrong with that, but there's also a time to get focused and give your attention to what it needs to give attention to. Sense making. So does that make sense? So that's a question you'll hear a lot of people say. I say it often. It's one of the things that I say quite regularly in class. Does that make sense to you? Because I'm trying to gauge with the people that I'm training in person. Hey, does that make sense? And if it doesn't, I'm going to fix it. I want to fix it for you. So there's a lot of things that go into things making sense for each individual person. And here's a list of them. They're definitely influenced by your personal identity and the way you've grown up, the way you've been married, if not, your relationships, the things that you do for work, your personal identity, the things that make you you. They're always grounded in past experiences, always. It's very difficult for people, humans, to think completely outside the box and not consider what's happened in the past when they're trying to make sense of something. It's impossible. So as you see something that doesn't make sense, you're going to go back to past experiences. This is why if we fill ourselves with social media or we fill ourselves with, and well, here's an even better example. Think about what a bad guy looks like. Okay. So when I say that, basically your mind probably goes to movies if you haven't had a lot of experiences with bad guys. So the way people look that are bad guys in the real world are very different than the way bad guys look in movies. You know, if I were to say, what does a bad guy look like in a movie? You're going to say he's got, dark clothes on, he hides in the shadows, and he's kind of squinting his eyes, and he's kind of uh, covered up and stuff of that nature. And bad guys aren't always looking like that. They look just like me and you. And so we need to try to understand that if that's the case, then just because somebody shows up, this happened right now as I was getting ready to record this, somebody showed at our door, didn't know the person, holding a piece of paper. He's got a construction truck out in front of the house. That doesn't mean that he's here to offer us a estimate or offer to do some work for us just because he has that. That could be a front. That could be something where he's utilizing that to break into a home or something of that nature to get information or get intelligence. So this kind of stuff happens on the fly. It's constrained by expected context, what you expect to be there, and it's very social. So constrained by expected context, I talked about this a little bit as relates to how to read people. We have a normalcy bias. Humans have a normalcy bias. We normalize everything. Most humans normalize everything, meaning any situation that takes us out of our comfort zone, we'll want to normalize it so that we don't have to deal with the problems that come up with something outside the norm that we're comfortable with. And so, understanding that means that we can pull ourselves out of that and be more prepared for whatever is happening around us. It's continuous and ongoing. You must extract, then interpret the clues. So you take in as much data as you can, you get as much information as you can, and then you start to interpret what it is that you're seeing. And a lot of times, because we can't tell the future, a lot of what we're seeing and how we interpret these clues will be driven by the assumptions of what we think is going to occur. So that is all into making sense. Story making is a little bit different than sense making, but it's similar. Okay. Once you start seeing a situation, a area, a gas station parking lot, a high-rise apartment lobby, the parking garage for a high-rise apartment, um, once you start taking in information, you're going to have to start building a story, and that story needs to be filled with as many facts as possible. The first would be the characters. Who's involved? Who's there? What am I seeing? What kind of people are there? What are they wearing? What kind of things are they exhibiting that we gathered from How to Read People? What are their motivations? Why are they there? Why are they in this particular location at this time? Hey, they live in the apartment building just like I do. Hey, they live in a neighborhood just like I do. That's real common. I know that person. So when somebody shows up and they don't live there, then that can be very problematic. It can be something that we want to pay attention to. Not that they're bad actors, but it could be a situation where somebody is in a situation where we need to pay attention to them. So what triggered the situation? What happened such that people in that particular spot were doing the things that they're doing? Okay. So you might see that somebody's on the ground. That sometimes can be an attractant. Say, I'm going to go help somebody. It could be that they're pulling you in. Okay. So here's some courses of action for you when it comes to story making. Visualize, know that there's going to be an action and reaction to everybody in every situation that you interact with, and know that there's going to be a counteraction by the people that you deal with. Make sure that you have as many decision points so that you can be prepared for the critical actions that might come up. Things like if I need to defend myself, if I need to remove myself from a situation. Think about it from a hurricane standpoint. If you pay attention to the news, then you know a hurricane's coming in your area, so we need to remove ourselves when we can. All right, geographics. This is probably my favorite part of this. So in this particular section, we're going to look at how people interact with basically the physical terrain, both from a natural perspective in a rural or wilderness situation, trees, hills, grass, parks, whatever, and the things that are man-made, whether it's a gas station or a building or whatever that might be. So this is probably the most critical aspect of this one. So make sure you get this because a lot of things hinge on these two things right here. It's what we call anchor points and habitual areas. So anchor points are basically, for most of us, our home. So anchor points are the thing or the place that makes us feel comfortable. And in that area, only people that are close to us are allowed in without any question. So think about you in your apartment or your home or wherever. If somebody that's in your family comes home, you don't, hey, they come in the door, they're unlocking the door, they've opened the garage door, whatever, and you just let them in and you don't do anything about it. Heck, you might not look up over your book that you're reading or whatever it is that's happening at the time. Those people are freely to enter. Those are your anchor points. Realize that those are anchor points. Habitual areas are common places where other people will gather that are outside of our immediate. I feel close. I feel comfortable with this person. Think about wherever you get gas. Think about wherever you get on the subway. Think about wherever it is that you get um, to and from work or school or whatever. Those are habitual areas where other people that you might recognize some of them, but you're not completely comfortable with them just showing up at your house either. So those are habitual areas. We typically travel from anchor point out to habitual areas and then into the unknown, basically. So this is important, familiarity. So like, let's say my daughter, she's going to college right now. There's people that she normally sees on a regular basis at the college that she has no idea who they are. So she has a certain amount of familiarity when that person is there. And so you'll often step this up with people that you're close to. So look at the photo that we've got here in our presentation. These three people know each other really well. Seems like they have the same mindset on some issues and the way they dress and stuff of that nature. So as you're reading a situation, you can see, okay, these people are familiar with one another, and then utilize that information. Comfort. People are attracted, and this is something that's come up 1,000 times teaching classes for what I do in person classes. People are attracted to places that remind them of their anchor points. So case in point, like if I'm teaching a wilderness survival course, for example, people will go back to their car for reasons that they don't really need to go back to their car for. And they do that because it reminds them of an anchor point. And so as an instructor, I recognize that and I try to adjust myself to that. You think about being in an area in Western Kentucky. I'm from Kentucky. So in Western Kentucky last year, we had 2 years ago, we had devastating tornadoes. Just whole towns were completely just destroyed. Homes removed, business were removed. Just a host of many different things happened. And you can imagine the people that were displaced being put in a gym on cots or whatever. Anything that could remind them of home would make them feel comfortable, even if it was a small bit of their home, even if it was a photo of somebody from their home. They haven't found that person yet. It would make them feel more comfortable if they had a photo of that person. It's an interesting thing to note when you're trying to guide and direct and lead other people, let's say in a disaster situation, and you need to remove yourselves, have something that makes people feel comfortable, meaning have something that helps remind them of their home. That's really key. One thing, you know, not to talk too much about my family, but my wife, no matter where we go, if we're leaving and we're going to stay overnight somewhere, she's going to take her pillow. And so that pillow, whether she thinks about it or not, is a comfort item for her that helps remind her of home. She she goes to bed, she sleeps, she gets some relaxation, she's recharged, ready to go for the next day. That pillow is a reminder of that, and so she likes to take her pillow with her. I can sleep with a rock as a pillow. I mean, I'm just in that position. But if you're recognizing that you are a leader of a group and you're seeing these are things that you should put in your go bag, put in your kit if you need to leave, in your trunk of your car, so that you've got them. Natural lines of drift. Okay. So I love this photo because it shows where two tire treads have gone up and down through this brick alleyway, but it gives us an idea of what I'm talking about. These are people these are areas where people follow the path of least resistance. And so you think about a neighborhood, for example, there's a neighborhood and there's whatever the meeting place is. People will follow typically the same path to and from. Now, the reason for that behind the scenes really is that we're herd animals. And if we've gone a certain direction or taken a path and everything turned all right, that tells us it's safe. So we continue to do that. So it doesn't matter if we're in a wilderness or urban setting, knowing where these paths of least resistance are. Like, think about it from a hunting perspective. If you know the wildlife corridor travel areas for deer, then you know where to set up a tree stand or where to stalk hunt or whatever it might be. If you're in an urban setting and you know that there's certain lines of drift and certain areas where people that are problematic, then I don't want to go there. I said for years, teaching self-defense, for example, that one of the best ways to not have to use self-defense is to not hang around drug dealers and not to go into bars, because there's just a lot of people not making good decisions in those areas. I'm not saying that either, I'm not saying that going to a bar is a bad thing. It's just a lot of people that are inebriated or under the influence of drugs or alcohol don't make good decisions. And so same thing is true here. If you know an area is very likely to have violence or people that can aggress you or something of that nature, then don't go there. Avoid it. Channels. Okay. This is what those in law enforcement and those who do room clearing and stuff like that would call the fatal funnel. So basically, this is a picture of a Walmart. This is actually, I think it's I don't know if this is my local Walmart. They all look the same, right? But this is a Walmart, and this person that is going into a certain set of doors, a certain area. Everybody's funneled into this door or the other one that's just down the way from this one. So these are areas where if I wanted to gather information about a group of people, then this is a place that I would look, because most everybody's going to go into this area and I can get information. I don't have to look at several different openings or entry points to an area. Same thing is true if somebody, for example, let's say there was an active shooter at this Walmart. Everybody that went in a certain door is typically, because again, we're herd animals, are going to want to go out that same door because that's what was safe at the time. If I was an active aggressor, that would be something that I would want to know. So for me, I want to know every place that I go into ever. I want to know alternate means of exit. So if something's happening that's causing problems, I'm not going to go out the same door if it's a real funnel channel area, because that's going to be the place that's less safe. Now, let's get into atmospherics. This is studying the environmental mood of a location. So this is important. So when we're looking at atmospherics, what we want to be able to do is determine, is this group of people agitated? Are they laid back? Is everything okay? And understanding that's going to be a critical point to knowing whether we should go into it or not. Think about a rock concert. You're going to a concert, you see everybody boom, 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 rocking to the music. Again, I think I mentioned this in the last presentation about how to read people. Same thing is true right here. If I'm seeing that the atmosphere is just a vibe or an energy, and I'm not trying to get all mumbo jumbo, but if you feel that something's not right because of the atmospherics of that particular location, you probably need to listen to yourself, or at least take a step back, start gathering data points, start to say, okay, why am I having these thoughts that something's not right? And then you go, oh, okay, I smelled this, and that typically makes me on high alert, and everything's okay. And then you can go in there. But at the same time, if you're starting to feel that, you either need to back out and leave, or at least back out and gather information and make a more clear decision. Group formations, situations where groups rapidly form or break apart and leave. This is really important. So think about it. If we hear a loud noise and then all of a sudden a lot of people gather to an area, first responders, their job is to probably figure that out rather quickly and assess that situation. For those of us in the civilian world, then we probably want to leave that situation because something's going on there. Now, that doesn't mean that we leave if we could provide help. Okay. But we need to at least back off and not immediately rush into the situation. Okay. In first aid training, one of the things you're taught is that when you come upon somebody that's laying down and they can't verbalize information to you, you literally stop and look at the situation and try to figure out what's going on. If somebody's twisted an ankle and you go rushing in, you might twist your ankle on the same thing they twisted their ankle on. And so now we got two people down. Same thing here as it relates to group formation. If a group of people come together very rapidly, something's there that's got information that we need to gather as much information, make a decision whether we want to enter into that area or not. Graffiti. Each region has its own style and icons for different groups and different gangs. So, for example, this is Latin Kings. This is a symbol for them. There's a whole study for people that work trying to prevent gang problems to happen, where they study symbology. I am really, really, really scratching the surface here. The reason I know what little bit I do about this topic, and I'm just pointing you in a direction on this because there's so much out there, is I had a program where I taught high school age kids martial arts for about 7 years in an area that was full of gang activity. And so one of the things that I did was I recognized gang colors and gang activity so that I wouldn't have, I had to come up with a plan so that if these people were of this gang and these people were of this gang, I didn't necessarily want them grappling together on a mat. And so I would come up with solutions for that. And it's important to understand some of the colors and things that go along with it. A few things as it relates to tattoos. A lot of different groups or gangs and affiliations will have symbols or colors or different numbers that represent things. For example, Southwest and Mexican gangs, they'll use the eagle from the Mexican flag. They'll have MS or 13. That is basically Border Brother gangs have Aztec warrior tats, tutus for BB, which is the second letter of the alphabet, BB, Border Brothers. And so these are all things that'll let us know what we need to see in as it relates to Southwest or Mexican gangs. Again, there's a lot to this. White supremacist, they'll have Celtic ruins, swastika or the letter H or 88, 311s like you see here in this particular tattoo. Those are, or 23, W is the 23rd letter for white supremacy. These are all hidden messages within different tattoos. And there's, again, so much that goes with this. So just be aware of these things. And if this topic interests you, then just Google it. What do gang symbols look like in tattoos? You can find a whole lot out. Prison tattoos, spider web on the elbow or a teardrop. There's a lot of conflicting information on what that teardrop means, so I don't want to go into that, but there's legitimate information that it does represent that it's a prison tattoo. All right, heuristics. This is a big word. Basically, I think I covered this briefly in how to read people as well, but it's basically how to make tactical shortcuts. He looks like a, she reminds me of a, it looks like a. Okay, so bad guys use this to their advantage as well and make themselves look like you when they know you. So these stickers on the back of these vans are some of the most maddening things I've ever seen in my life. Now, a bad person now knows that they don't have a dog at the house. They've only got cats and goldfish. They've got 3 children, 2 adults. And if somebody's going to aggress you, they might, and what's even worse than this is having the names of the people on these stickers so that you can go, hey, Craig got hurt over here and he needs you, pull you away, because that's the name of your child or something. So don't put this type of stuff on your vehicles. Don't put stickers on your vehicles that let everybody know that you've got guns in the vehicle. These are things that are just real quick shortcuts to let me know as a bad guy that, hey, you've got things in there that interest me. I want to steal your guns, for example, if I'm a bad guy and that's what I want to do. One of the things that goes with that right now with something I'm getting into, which is ham radio. Ham radio, you have this big special antenna on your vehicle, and that kind of lets everybody know there's a ham radio there. I remember going to a class many years ago where there was a Navy SEAL at this particular class, and he was teaching. I was teaching one class, and he was teaching on the range next to me. And when I rolled in, I had a extra antenna on my truck to extend my cell phone out farther. And it's just a very uncommon thing that very few people have. And so he comes by and he looks and he goes, "What's an antenna for?" And I mean, he was that observant. It was really insightful that he was that observant. I just pull in a lot and he's already assessing me. And so that's a good thing. He's just being aware of his environment, what's going on. He got an opportunity to learn something that he was not aware of about these particular antennas and why I had it and stuff like that. But if it was something that, hey, that pointed to something else or a unit or a agency that he worked with and he wanted to know about it, which is just good information gathering. Now, again, here's some books. I mentioned these in the first one, same books, same reasons. My book for wilderness survival, uh, there's just very few survival books out there that talk about observation and awareness, which is being, I can't comprehend it. I just can't comprehend, because most of what happens in the outdoors that causes problems is people not being aware of their surroundings. So pick up my book if you're into camping, hiking, survival, and stuff of that nature. Left of Bang is the book based on Combat Hunter Program. DeBecker's book, The Gift of Fear, and then my buddy Matthew Dermody's book, Situational Sense. So those will help you. We've got these topics. We talk about them on the podcast on a semi-regular basis. So check out the podcast. And then naturereliance.org. That's us. And we're glad you're here. Glad you're part of what it is that we do at Nature Reliance School. As always, come on, join in. Let's learn together.